It's a sad day for the FNAF community because today I'm going to go over why I think Henry might have never let his daughter's soul rest and explaining how the puppet is still around somewhere after Pizzeria Simulator. Let's set the stage for how I got here. Recently on a poll, I asked you guys when you thought Happiest Day took place. More than half of you answered with after Pizzeria Simulator. But first, is Happiest Day even canon? Yes, I'd like to believe it is. In Scott's interview with Daco, he said the answer was complicated. Why? Because I think both the bad and good ending are canon, just occurring at different times. The bad ending is the ending of FNAF 3, with the souls not being put to rest yet because they're still active, to be lured by Henry into the Pizzeria Simulator restaurant, as stated by his insanity-ending speech.
He lured them all back to a familiar place, back with familiar tricks. He brought them all together. Are they still aware? I hope not. I have to call them all back, all of them, together in one place.
He's clearly talking about Follow Me, and by referring to Follow Me and then talking about luring them all back here, we can deduce that the MCI souls have to be in this location, either through Lefty, Springtrap, Molten Freddy, all of them combined, or whatever. It doesn't matter. For this theory, somehow, someway, we know the MCI kids are at this location, and that can only be possible if they haven't been free yet. Now, when does Happiest Day take place? Well, we can place it either after Pizzeria Simulator, like you guys said, or after UCN. I'm more inclined to believe UCN, and here's why. In the security logbook, we get an entire page dedicated to Happiest Day, with an image of the puppet giving a little girl a cake. This directly parallels the puppet giving the Golden Freddy kid a cake. But the crying child isn't a girl, so we can assume this is Cassidy. Yes, under the assumption Cassidy is a girl and not a boy, but from the fourth closet and the vengeful spirit's voice, I'm inclined to believe Cassidy to be a girl. With the knowledge this spirit is probably Cassidy, and Cassidy being behind UCN, we can deduce that Happiest Day can't happen until after UCN. You can argue why or why not this is true. Actually, I encourage discussions and vocal disagreements with me in my comments. Just do it respectfully, please. But there's something more important I want to point out about Happiest Day. The puppet's mask. The puppet's mask falls slower and is the last to hit the ground, but why? Well, you could argue it's for dramatic effect, but I want to argue something different. This scene is representing the puppet not entirely moving on, almost rejecting the Happiest Day for itself, and I think the idea is supported by a story from Tales from the Pizzaplex, Frailty. Frailty is the very first story in all of Tales. I actually have a point to make about that fact later on, but for the first story of Tales, it gives us an interesting plot. We follow a girl named Jessica, a quiet girl, always keeping to herself, who works at a local hospital mopping floors. But Jessica has a heart pendant that she shaves off to help dying kids in the hospital. She meets a boy, falls for him, and is asked to go to prom with him. When at prom, she gets oil on the boy, rejects that the prom was for someone like her, and helps one last patient before dying. I believe Jessica is a parallel to the puppet. Here we have a story of a young girl, helping by literally giving life to dying kids in a hospital. That sounds a whole lot like the puppet's entire shtick of giving life and giving gifts. So Jessica is a parallel to the puppet. So what? What is this story actually telling us about Charlotte that we don't already know? Well, that's when the prom comes in. The prom is the only thing that makes Jessica happy in the story, the only thing that she looks forward to. It's literally her happiest day, but she rejects it. I find this line especially interesting. This world wasn't for her. It was for someone else who deserved it. So Jessica leaves the prom to help a sick kid she had befriended named April. And in this final moment of sacrifice, Jessica dies. I believe this story is telling us that the puppet rejected moving on in the Happiest Day, believing it was for someone else, the other kids. Yes, I know this story is also a callback to Eleanor, but I think this story is telling us two things. One, that Eleanor exists in whatever continuity this is. And if Tales Games is canon to the games, then this story makes Eleanor and Stitchline canon, which then would make the scene of the puppet mask being used to destroy the Afton amalgamation canon, and that would still mean the puppet wasn't put to rest by Happiest Day, which would make this story still a parallel. There's also another interesting detail I'd like to point out. This is the first story of Tales from the Pizzaplex, and the first story of Fazbear Frights is Into the Pit. And wouldn't it be interesting for these stories to kind of parallel each other? One about the killer Afton, and the other about the arch nemesis of Afton, the puppet. Just an interesting idea. Here's my socials, here's a Faz token, and I'll catch you at 6 a.m.